Go ahead and dive into the first topic, which was a question sent to me by Julia. And Julia was asking about, and I'll pull my phone up just to make sure I have the exact question. Why do some horses hate to be brushed? Do you think that grooming is important? Well, first and foremost, certainly grooming is important. It's like part of the basic hygiene with our horses, particularly when we're riding our horses. You can imagine if we don't groom our horses and bathe our horses, that their hair might get to laying funny and matted, and then you go to cinch up against that hair that's matted. It's almost like if you've gone skiing or if you've wore really high tube socks or something. If your hair is not used to your hair on your legs or any part of your body is not used to that friction of clothing being against it, it can be kind of sore and irritated. And it's just basic hygiene with our horses. We want to make sure, particularly in the springtime, that we're giving our horse an antiseptic type bath to make sure we're combating any fungus or bacteria that's growing. Just because here in Kentucky, we're used to dealing with humidity. Some of you guys may not deal with that at all. But grooming is absolutely important. It's something we do with our horses every day. And it's a great thing to do with your horse with no expectation. It's just something we can do with our horses just to hang out and be with them and make them feel better. Grooming it's a great time where we're not asking them to really do anything. And we're just saying, hey, we're gonna make you feel better. We're gonna get this mud and stuff off of you. We're gonna give you a bath. We're gonna make you feel clean and fresh. And some people might go, well, my horse hates that. Well, that's what we're gonna get to in this part of the question is that Julia asked, why do some horses hate being brushed? And my question is, does the horse really hate being brushed, or is there another root to that problem? A lot of times what I find with the horses I deal with is that it could be what we would see is a horse that maybe hates being brushed doesn't always just give us the sign when we go to brush them, but maybe they start to pin their ears or tighten their posture, change their posture when we go to approach that horse. So we haven't even got to the brushing yet, right? We might have grabbed the brush and we're going to go to brush them, but when we go to approach them, they change their entire expression, which gets tight and tense, almost looks a little angry, or maybe your horse gets worried. And my question is then, okay, why is that horse giving us that, or that they're communicating with us? Because if we were another horse and they give that kind of expression, and then we didn't heed that communication, if we didn't listen to that communication, that horse might have to do something else like kick, bite, strike another horse to get their point across. Whereas with a lot of people, the horses know that is unacceptable. And so, but the problem is that as humans, we don't always listen to those initial ways of communication from our horses and say, hey, I saw that. Hey, I understand something's bothering you. And I have a horse that's been with us and has these types of associations. And he'll do it whether you're going to put if you're going to saddle him, if you're going to groom him, if you're just going to walk up to him, he gets really tight. And it's not that he doesn't like being saddled. It's not that he doesn't like being groomed, because once you take your time to approach him and acknowledge the fact, say, hey, buddy, I see that you got tight. I see that you're a little bit uncomfortable about whatever is going to happen, whether it's a brush or a saddle pad or just we're walking up to pet him. That if you pause and you just say, hey, and mentally say, or you can actually say it to your horse if you want to, that, hey, I see that you're a little uncomfortable. Why are you and then start thinking about why is that the case? But a lot of times just simply acknowledging that horse's concern or being upset with initially just the approach to them, can change that horse's perspective, because it's the fact that now you're listening to your horse. And so why do I think that some horses would essentially hate being brushed is because they have tried to communicate in the past that they were not okay with something, and the human, maybe not intentionally, but they did not even recognize, or maybe they did recognize it and chose not to acknowledge and to deal with the horse's feelings in the situation about not being okay with what is about to happen. And in turn, when we do that, when we either don't recognize our horse's feelings in those moments, or we don't recognize the communication, the things that they're trying to communicate to us, a couple of things can happen. One can be that they get very upset and very angry, and then they get very crabby, and they get to be just not pleasant to be around, or they always look like they're pissed off, or they can shut down and they just kind of go inside themselves and they internalize. And so they probably hold a fair bit of tension within their bodies, but they're very non-expressive quite a bit. And it's basically because they've gone introverted style of dealing with their problems, and they just hold it all in. And at some point we come into a principle that I oftentimes refer to as the pressure cooker, where there can only be so much tension inside before something has to be let loose. Right. And in some form or fashion, and that can come out in a variety of ways. But when I look at horses that don't like being brushed, I got to look at, is it actually the brushing? Because it could be. Right. Say that you could walk up to your horse and you could pet them, but you go to brush them and they're very sensitive on their skin. I want to make sure we acknowledge that part, at least, is that they're very touchy about their skin. I'm probably going to refer to somebody that's a little more specialized, but personally for me, I'm going to start thinking about my horse's internal system. One of the first go-tos that I go to is my horse's gut healthy? All right. Is my horse feeling good inside? Because we oftentimes, if we just think about yourself for a little bit, I know that humans and horses have differences and uniquenesses in our own bodies and how things operate. But if your stomach doesn't feel good, a lot of other things don't work properly or feel optimized in their performance, right? And so I would be first thinking, hey, is my horse's GI tract taken care of? Is there a good bacteria, a gut flora growing in my horse? They don't have ulcers, or they aren't experiencing uncomfortableness somewhere in their GI tract. And then from there, we might start looking at other types of things as far as kidneys or whatever. I work very closely with an osteopath that is very intuitive and understands the connectedness within the body from certain organs to certain outer type things, whether it's a muscle or maybe just the actual surface level of the skin. And so I would defer to somebody like that is more of a professional in that field. So there certainly can be things that we can notice, like, hey, my horse is really, really touchy on the top of their skin and they get really tense, and that is legitimate. And that is something that I would then in turn probably turn to. I tend to turn, unless it's an emergency, I'll turn to somebody like an osteopath first, depending on the issue. And then, because the osteopath, for you guys that don't maybe not be familiar, an osteopath is a specialist in locomotion of the body. And they take into consideration not just the movement of the limbs and the muscles and the tendons, but also how the entire body is connected, from your central nervous system to how their gut system works, and how the autonomic nervous system works, and how their muscles and their bones and their tendons, like I said, how the whole body moves together, and how certain receptors in one part of the body can trigger another receptor in the other part of the body. It's the movement of all parts of the body, neurology, the internal organs, as well as our muscles, bone, and tendons type of the deal. So I work very closely with one when I run into any kind of physical issue. And oftentimes with the one I work with, we talk a lot about gut health. So if you are starting to see like, hey, my horse is just touchy on the top of the skin, you might try to find somebody in your area to talk to and say, hey, like, that is the case. But also make sure, like, look at there's the old principle that says what happens before what happens happens. So we have to recognize what happens before what happens happens. Well, what is happening in this case is the horse is upset about being brushed. Well, what happened before the horse is being upset about being brushed? Well, if we could click rewind, or we literally could just back up and reapproach, what's the horse like as we're getting closer? And at what point, how close do we get before an expression changes? Some horses, right? Say a horse didn't have a trouble with this at all. A horse could prick their ears and they could be like, hey, it's great to see you. And they could be, it could be a very welcoming type of thing. Whereas sometimes you get horses and they're like picking their hind foot up, swishing their tail, cranking their neck, their nose gets tight, their body gets tight, they change their posture, and everything just goes the opposite way that we'd like to see them doing it. And we have to recognize that. And sometimes by simply saying, hey, I see that, which tells your horse, you're aware, you're present with your horses in that moment, can then change their entire expression. I do that routinely with the horse that's in our barn that we've been helping with this, is that anytime he gets crabby, if I'm walking past his stall, if I've got him tied up, if I'm going to go put the bridle on him, if I'm going to put the saddle on him, as soon as he gets tight and everything like that, I just wait. And I wait until his expression changes. And sometimes it takes a fair bit. But that horse, I can't say this 100%, but I can say it about 98.9%, is that he hasn't had someone wait on him in the past. And so he's just gotten very pissed off about people blowing right through everything that he lays out there for you to know that he is upset about it. And people have just put the blinders on and gone right past it. And he's just gotten upset, and it got pretty ugly. He pretty much had that pressure cooker effect where everything started coming out, and that's why he got sent to us. And that horse, if you just wait on him, he'll flip his ears. He's so expressive, and he'll flip his ears and he'll change, and he'll take a big deep and lick and chew, and he'll yawn, and he'll just completely get that dopamine release. But when it comes to horses that don't like being brushed, we got to think about, is it actually the brushing? If it is the brushing, is it a physical issue? And then think about the type of brush you're using. Would it be a brush that they would actually like? Are you brushing them in a way that is actually enjoyable? Or are you like pulling the hair off of their hide, right? Sometimes it's not what we do, it's how we do it. Sometimes it's not the what being that you actually approach your horse, but maybe it's how you approach your horse. Maybe it's how you brush your horse, or how you're thinking about your horse. They pick up on all of that, all right? But that's kind of my approach, Julia, to this particular type of question.